Hi friends, welcome back to my channel Testing Mini Bytes. I am your friend Undone. In this video, we're gonna see about function interface. Again, function is a functional interface in Java 8, right? So we have already seen about consumer as well as supplier interfaces, and this is the third interface that functional interface that we are speaking about, right? And if you notice, we have an abstract method here as well, because we are speaking about lambda expression, and we need an abstract method in order to write a lambda for it. Again guys, if you're just directly watching this video, please do watch the previous videos in this playlist so that you can understand what I'm speaking now, right? Good. So there is an abstract method, and then the signature looks something like this. And we have already spoken about generics, but to give a high level understanding, if you notice, the method name is supply, and it takes an argument of t type. This t can be integer, it can be string, or it can be an array list or whatever, right? And it returns an or type of value, right? So this or can also be string, integer, double, or whatever, right? So it basically denotes the return type of the method, right? So the method signature is very simple. It takes one type of argument, and it returns one type of argument, or it can also return a different type of argument as well. Good. It has two default methods, undone and compose. We'll see about that in detail. It also have a BiType which takes two arguments and return one particular type, right? This or can be anything. Good. It also has a static method called as identity, though we don't have a specific use case for that, but we'll also learn about what it is. And we in the next video we'll also see about how we can use this in an explicit way, how we can use this in Selenium specific use cases. We'll do that, right? Good. Now let's, without wasting much time, let's get into the IntelliJ workspace, and let's start to write some code, right? So let's create some variables right here, and let me name it as function, right? So if you notice, this java.util.function, this is coming from java.util.function, and t comma r is the generic. So it is basically telling me, tell the input argument and the output type as well. So this is generics, right? We need to tell what is the input parameter type that we are going to pass. So in my case, let's assume I'm going to pass integer. Then it's also asking me what is the output type that you're expecting from this method. Let's assume I'm also expecting an integer as an output type. Okay, if you have some doubts, go to this particular interface and see up method apply. It takes an input of t, so whatever the t that you are supplying here in this generics is this. Okay, and whatever the r you are mentioning is return type. So whenever someone is writing function t comma r, the first parameter is input to your method, second parameter is the output type of your return type, right? That's as simple as that. So let's go to the particular code, right? Good. Now here, let's say I want to do add 5 operation. So if someone is giving me an I value, I'm gonna return them I plus 5. So basically the input is, sorry guys, so basically the input is an integer as well as the output. So if I'm gonna sum 5 to any number, it will be definitely a number, right? It's definitely an integer. So this is the lambda expression that we have written. Again, if you want to, since this is a single line lambda, I have written like this. Otherwise you can also write like this, right? So return I plus 5. Okay, you can also write like this. Okay, since this is a single line lambda, you can also write it in one line, and you can also remove the braces. If this, you don't have to even specifically mention the return type, because the Java compiler is very smart and it can understand that it has a return type of integer. So I can write like this, right? Good. Now I also want to create one more thing. Let's say I want to multiply by 5, right? So I can basically write like this. Okay, let's try to use this in our code, and let's see. So I'm typing add 5 dot. So there is a method called apply. Now this takes an integer as an input argument, because we have mentioned integer as the input argument here in the first generic type, right? So apply lets me pass an integer, let's say 5 to this. And let me print out this whole stuff, the value of it, using a sysout statement. Let's try to run this particular test, and you all can guess the 5 will be passed here, and 5 plus 5 output will be 10, right? Good. So the output is basically 10, and you can also see from the result here. Good. Now I also want to do a multiplication of 5. So the multiplication 5 dot apply. Again, this also takes an integer. Let me pass the 5 as well. And now I also want to see the value. So I'm just using this out. Let's try to run it. It should return you 25, right? So it's working fine. So we know how we can use this function interface, right? Now I want to do both the operations sequentially, right? Let's say I want to add, someone is telling 5, I want to add 5 as well as multiply 5. Okay, then I can create something like this, function and integer comma integer, right? Because output will be integer anyway if I add 5 and then multiply 5. So add 5 and multiply by 5. Okay, so what I can do, if someone is passing me an I, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm gonna add a 5 as well, multiply by 5, right? At the end of the day, it is returning me integer, so that's good. So let's try to do a sys out and then check. So basically add 5 and multiply 5 dot apply, and then 5. Okay, so the 5 plus 5 is 10, and 10 into 5 is 50. So we are expecting a 50 as output. Let's see. So basically we are getting the required output. So again, I want to do a multiplication of 5 and then an add of 5. So I want to do something like that. So let's try to do it. Function integer comma integer. So basically mult 5 and add 5. Guys, forgive my naming convention. It's just the random name that I'm trying to give now. So it's basically I star 5 plus 5. So basically this will work, but I prefer using brackets for more readability. Okay, my intention is not to write a some complex code, but to write a more readable code. So it's always preferred to use brackets, right? So let's try to run the test and see. Okay, I need to use it in the code. S out, multiply by 5, apply, okay, and then give 5. So this time it will multiply 5 into 5 plus 5, right? So it will be 30. Let's try to run the test. So if you notice, we are writing a lot of code here, right? So this is not an act of negligence. It's basically a crime in software coding. So you are not reusing the same code that we have already created, right? So basically, we are doing a lot of stuff here, right? A lot of verbosity. So to avoid this, we have something else in Java 8 function interface, that is your undone method and compose methods. Let's see what it does. So let's say I want to do add 5, just put on dot, and now if you notice there is something called as andThen. So this andThen is also accepting another function that is input type is integer. So it's more like that, right? So we already have something like that. So if you notice, we have one more function that is input type is also integer. So we can actually do a chaining of these operations. So I can pass multiply by 5 here, and then do an apply, and then pass the value. Okay, now I want to print all these things, so I am wrapping them in a sysout statement. Now if you notice, instead of creating an variable and then doing a lot of stuff, we can actually use the andThen method. And let me comment out this whole stuff, okay, so that we are only interested in this now. So first we want to add 5 and then multiply by 5, right? So it basically does that. Now I also want to do this way, so that I want to multiply by 5 and then add 5. Okay, then okay, you can use like this, right? Mult 5, okay, and then add 5. We can do that like this. Also, you also have one way that you can do the other way. So compose and then multiply, and then here you can pass your values, right? So basically the andThen will first, in the andThen method, first add 5 will be evaluated, and then multiply 5 by 5 will be evaluated. In this case, first the multiply by 5 will be evaluated, and then the add will be evaluated. So let's try to check the values, right? So you can basically use this undone and compose methods to do this stuff, right? So let's go inside this undone and compose. Okay, we have already learned about this compose and undone. Okay, basically the only thing that is different is the sequence of operations. So yeah, now there is also one more static method called identity, and we'll also see how we can use this in our code. So let's say you have some function, let's say function, okay, that takes an integer and takes no, and also return that particular integer. Say same, you have some kind of operation like this for some reasons. Like, I mean, who will use like this, right? So you are gonna get the integer and then return the same thing. Why we need that? So there may be cases that you may need to achieve like this. In that cases, instead of doing like this, you can also mention function dot identity. So function is a interface, and then there is a method, a static method called identity. So you can access using interface name dot static name. So now if you do a sys out same dot, you can do an apply and 5. So if I pass 5, it's gonna return me 5. So what is new in that? Again, if your use cases like that, there are some use cases where it saves some spaces, but yeah, we will come to that later. But for now, just understand this identity method is something, it's similar to your um, lambda expression of this. Okay, good. So basically we have understand all these things, right? So let's try to use something else, right? Let's assume we are having a function that takes in a string input parameter and returns an integer. So maybe a length function. If someone is passing me an s string, I'm going to find it length, right? So it's as simple as that. Again, we can use method references, and then see my my id itself is suggesting, okay, you can replace this method reference. Yeah, you can do that, right? But for now, let's keep it as to lambda, because we are not yet covered the method references so far. So if you notice, the function takes an input argument a string and returning integer. So let's try to use this in our code. Let me remove this. Okay, for more readability, I am removing all this thing. So s out length dot apply, I want to pass some string here. Okay, now it will return me the length. Now I also want to do one thing. So s out length dot, and then I want to add a 5. Okay, dot apply, and then the value is basically, or basically testing mini bytes, right? Something like this. So what will happen in this case, guys? Think about the answer now before I'll run it. So if you notice, the number of letters will be calculated. So 5, 6, and then we have 10, 11, and then we have 18, right? So 18 characters. So testing mini bytes is 18 characters. So what it happens, first it will evaluate this particular thing, so 18, and then it'll add 5 to it, right? So I could chain this particular thing and this particular thing, because the output of this particular function is integer, will be fed as a input for this. Okay, so the main important condition to do the chaining is the output of first function should be output type. Okay, output type of the first function should be input type for the second one. Right? So that's the basic necessity to to do the chaining. Okay, let me go to the Chrome. I have some diagram to show. If you notice, this is the input. So I do some operation with this. Okay, whether I add a 2 or multiply by 2, or I'm doing some operation or doing a division, whatever. But if you want to do the chaining, the output of your first operation should be, the type should match for the input 2, right? Good. The same way, the output of your second operation, the type should match with your input type of your third operation. So this is how this works, right? So the function is an interface, has an abstract method called apply, which can help you to change the state from one to another. It will not obviously all the time it will change it to a different type, but yeah, it can also change it to a same type with different values. Good. Good. Now let's go here again, and then also, if you notice, this code looks a little noisy, right? So basically a function that takes an input argument as integer and output type as also integer, can we have a better way of writing this? And that's when people also having, the Java developers also have created something called as Unary Operator. So that is very, very cool. So the same thing, add 5 using Unary. So if someone is passing me an I am gonna return them I plus 5. It's the same. But if you notice, it's not throwing any error because the unary operator indicates, okay, if your input is also same type, output is also same type, you don't have to write it twice. You give me this, I will treat like this. Okay, let's go here. It's notice, it's a function. It's a basically extending your function, and the input is also same type, output is also same type. So instead of writing a verbose code like that, you can basically use an unary operator, and then you can write like this. So it's very cool. Again, if you want to use this in your code, do an s out and add 5 using unary dot apply. Okay, and then whatever value you want. So it's gonna work absolutely the same way, right? Again, we also have a BiType called as BiFunction. So let's take an example of BiFunction, right? So it takes in 3 generics. So if you go to the class, it takes 2 input arguments and 1 output argument. So if you take 2 input arguments, T and U, and your output argument is R. So let's go here. So let's assume you take 2 input argument as integer, comma integer, okay, and your output is also integer. For now, I'm just speaking about integer. It can be for any classes, guys. Okay. So if someone is passing me a plus b, I'm gonna a comma b, I'm gonna return them a plus b. It's as simple as operation, right? Okay, I need to name it. Let's say sum, right? As simple as that. So I can also use this. The only difference between the function and the BiFunction is it takes 2 arguments. That's the only difference. Okay. So s out, I want to pass 6 comma 5. Okay. So the output will be 11, right? Sorry guys, I need to call the sum dot apply method and then 6 comma 5. And if you also notice one more thing, in the BiFunction, we don't have compose or identity methods. So it has only and then. Whatever the operation you have to do, you have to use this and then method. So that's the only difference, right? Let's try to run the test and see what's happening. So whether it is printing 11 or not. So yeah, it's printing 11. Good. And what else we can do? Again, guys, if you notice, the generics becomes 3 and it's not readable as well. So what you can do, you can also write binary operator. There is something called as binary operator. So if you take in the same parameters and return the same, then you can just mention once. That's like this. Okay. So the sum using binary operator. Okay. So it works the same way, right? So unary and binary operator, you have understood about that. There are also other child interfaces, not only unary operator and binary operator. If you go to the Java documentation, they have a lot of things, right? Let's start with this. So we also know about BiFunctions. We also know about binary operator. So if you notice, it takes 2 operands of the same type, and the return type is also same as the operands. So it's as simple as that. If you notice, there is a double function represent and accepts a double valued argument. So the input to the function is a double value, but the return type can be anything. So whenever you are declaring, you just declare the return type. Okay. Let's try to cover just this part as well. So the name is double function. So PRS double function, right? So double function. And here you just need to mention the return type. Okay, go to this particular class interface and see you pass whatever the thing that you are passing is just your return type. The input type is obviously your double. Okay, so that's based on the method signature, you can understand. So let's say it's returning me a string. Okay, so maybe double to string is the name of this. Okay, if somebody is passing me, okay, and a double value, maybe D, I'm going to do a string dot value of, and then I'm going to pass it there. And I can use a method reference, but for now, this particular lambda expression, what it does, it takes a double and then it returns a string. So you can use by double function if your input type is double. The same way, there are a lot of other things like double predicate and then double to int function, which means your input value is double and then the output is int. So you can use this. The same way, you can try all this other stuff. So if you notice, int function, basically it accepts an invalid argument, but it produces any kind of OR result. Okay, so there are a lot of other functions, long to double function. If you also notice the to in function, to long by function, to long function. So if you notice, it's a function that produces a int valued result. So that whatever the thing that you are giving in the generics is basically your input. The output is always going to be integer. So you have to understand by going into their code and see what is they are telling. Okay, you can use any of these, but you to understand, at the high level, at least you need to know what is a function and BiFunction, what is unary operator, and what is binary operator. This is very, very mandatory if you have to use streams and other stuff, because they might be using a terminology like unary operator. So at that time you have to understand what it is, right? So yeah, I think we have covered pretty much about the function interface. It is very easy, guys. Just practice it. Again, we will cover in depth on how we can use this in Selenium framework or your other test automation frameworks, right? I will see you all guys in another great video. Until then, tada, bye bye.